Like I went from interviewing a woman who's, urine's leaking, into a kitchen where she
Right.
cooks food to interviewing billionaires.
Tell us briefly, how do you get from toilets with urine leaking down to the kitchen to Bermuda?
This idiot judge, he's an idiot, a disgrace to the legal profession because this was a fraud that preyed on the elderly. He issued it in his judgment, default judgment, by unended appearances. This is so obviously not a fraud. I need to send a message so that Privileged Wealth can take my message to their clients and reassure them. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, man, you've got to be a fucking idiot. It made me angry, right?
I bet it did. Hello and welcome to the Intelligence Advantage podcast, where we talk to the movers and shapers in the investigation and intelligence space. My name is Gary Miller. I've been an investigative lawyer for nearly half a century, and I'm also the chairman of the IFG, a network of international investigative and asset recovery lawyers. I am absolutely delighted to be joined today by David Marchant, someone who I've known for many, many years and has been in the investigative journalist game for well over 30 years, David. I looked at your list of magazines and newspapers, and it dates back to a long time ago. Let's put it like that. We won't give away your age immediately. But David is the founder, editor, CEO, chief bottle washer, and everything else at Offshore Alert, which anyone and everyone that's in the investigative and asset chasing space will know of and will attend at least once or twice a year his conferences, which are renowned in our space. So welcome, David, and thank you very much for taking time to join us.
Thank you for having me, Gary.
I was thinking about what makes an investigator, an investigative journalist buzz, what really makes them get up in the morning. And one of the things I came up with is that all of us love taking risk. Is that something that you particularly enjoy? Do you like pushing the boundaries?
I don't like assuming risk for risk's sake. I like to challenge myself. So that's in the same ballpark. But, I think for an investigative journalist, you need to have a chip on at least one of your shoulders because it's quite a stressful job. Journalism, unlike the industry you're in, law, doesn't pay particularly well. You've got some investigative journalists earning a pittance who work really, really hard, get up in the morning with determined to, expose someone or something. So you need to be driven. I've got a chip on each of my shoulders. Being motivated isn't a problem.
All right. So it begs the question, where do those chips come from, David? Come on, reveal it all.
Well, it's difficult to say, because I'm not a psychologist, but, I was educated at state school for most of my education. I had a couple of years at private school in South Wales. And the most important thing that I learned at private school had nothing to do with academics. It was just observing my fellow pupils who were, substantially different to the Monmouth Comprehensive School students. It was almost like another species. And that's what I learned, just observing them and thinking about, why are you different? Why are you sort of taller, more athletic, seemingly better educated? And, why are you sort of pompous in some cases? That's where my education came, not from the classroom.
So
And
how did
my
you?
first, yeah,
Sorry, let me interrupt you and ask you. It sounds like quite, and you've said it is quite a juxtaposition to go from Monmouth, um, whatever it was, to a private school. What on earth gave way or gave rise to
yeah.
that? Was it your
Well,
decision?
no. So I was at Monmouth Comprehensive School and for up until my O levels, and there was also a private school called Monmouth School. It's quite highly regarded. And the only three subjects that realistically I could have taken at A level, given my grades, were maths, physics, and English. Now, I couldn't do those at Monmouth Comprehensive School A level because the lessons clash. It's an unusual combination. And
That in itself is very interesting. I never would have had you as a science man. And maths, I hated science
yeah.
and I struggled with maths and physics. Don't even talk about it. I think I got 6%. So, out of your O levels, am I allowed to ask how many O levels you came away with?
I think I got 7 from memory.
Okay, that's pretty decent. And your
Yeah.
top grades were maths, physics, and
Yes. But something like maths, my brain works in a certain way. I don't have a degree, never wanted to study a degree. Well, I think it was Rowan Atkinson used to do. He used to have a line in his stand-up where he said he was educated from the University of Life, the School of Hard Knocks, and the kindergarten of having the shit kicked out of him. Now I didn't have the shit kicked out of me any stage of my education, but I always liked that line because it sort of denoted a more unconventional approach to education. And for me, an education is just walking around with your eyes and ears open. But I can tell you now, my father paid for me to go to private school. It was in the town where I lived, so I didn't have to board or anything like that. But comes to like how are the students different? I can remember I was assigned to townhouse, right, a non-boarding house. And I can remember there was one kid in there who used to wear this like cravat. I mean, listen, nobody at Monmouth Comprehensive School wore a cravat. But interestingly, the reason he wore a cravat was he tried to kill himself.
oh wow.
Hang himself, right? And this was hiding the scars. I think there was actually in one of the Clint Eastwood movies, he did a similar thing, Hang 'em High, I think it was. And and I can remember, to this day thinking, Jesus, like I'd never come across anyone, who'd attempted to kill himself, or certainly that I knew of.
But so
You know,
people knew it wasn't as if he was wearing it and people thought, I thought you immediately were going to say, what a pompous git walking
no,
around with people and the students knew that it was to hide a scar because of course, sports and everything, right?
yeah, I mean, I was told, this is what I was told, but I can remember this was just a novel concept. I don't think I'd ever um, even thought of the subject. So, I'm a curious person, which is, a prerequisite for an investigative journalist. You've got to be curious, you know. And so it was just things like that, made me think in a sort of different way. And I sucked at that school, honestly. I'd done a materially different curriculum leading up to the A levels.
Right.
And
So
I think this is, yeah. So
what
can
do you
you imagine going to a school, you haven't done the same curriculum leading up to the A levels, and you're stupid enough or arrogant enough to think you can just go in there and do whatever.
so
And
what did you study there? What subjects did you study
maths, physics, and English.
at
And I
the
remember
at the private school?
at the private school, this is how bad I was. Right, at some stage I just gave up.
Right.
I can remember the physics practical exam.
Yeah.
Couldn't even set up the apparatus properly, much less conduct the experiment and plot the results. And I can always remember the moderator said, "Okay, 5 minutes left." I hadn't even set up the apparatus, so I got the graph paper. I just drew a random line, I mean, it was insane, you know. I walked out of there. And again, another thing I learned about myself is I didn't beat myself up. I walked out of there sort of, you know, laughing at myself, you know, how
Okay.
stupid I was, you know.
But did you
Uh,
attend any of the lectures or whatever? Was it
no,
basically?
I attended it, but there are other things like, you know, my home life wasn't particularly stress-free. Let's just uh, say, put it at that. You know, so there are just different things going on. Again, which is all learning, you know, that's an education, you know, stuff going on in your house. That's a learning experience, right? You know, it's not down and just, oh, another thing I can remember is, I can remember in English, I decided, you know what, I'm going to make an extra effort. This one particular time, we had to write an essay on Chaucer or something, right? I'm actually going to make an effort. Going to cite, you know, books. I'm going to read some books that are relevant to the essay, as opposed to just, you know, reeling off the top of my head as I've done it hitherto. So the teacher clearly noted that this essay that I'd done was unlike any other I'd done. And he gave me 2 grades. He said, you wrote A plus, assuming you didn't plagiarize, F minus if you did.
Okay.
And I can remember thinking, you know, fuck you. You know, honestly, like seriously, Gary, not even joking.
Wow.
I
Okay.
from a physics thing, laughing at myself. No. I have just done what all of these other idiots in the class have done, right? Read the books that you want them to read, you know, borrowed from them, whatever, right? And the essays were piled on top of each other. You know,
Yeah.
when we put them in, I looked at this one, looked at that one, you know, after I'd written it, and they'd all done what I'd done. Everyone else got an appropriate grade. For some reason, me, you know, it's either an A plus or an F minus, depending on whether you're a cheat. You know, questioning my character, if you like. So that's another thing I learned, you know, how unjust the system was, you know.
And now looking back on it, let's do a little bit of self-reflection. This was the only time in your, because you said, or you mentioned you'd given up that school, but you'd
Oh
never.
no, I left the school.
You left the school.
I completed the school. Did my
Oh, I
A-levels.
see. Okay,
Didn't
but
do
you'd
very
made.
well in the A levels. Yeah, I'd given up in the sense I realized, okay, this ain't going very well. You know, I need to come to terms with it.
Okay, but this was, and you know, trying to condense all of this into one sentence or one snippet of this conversation, but this was pretty much the only time you put your head down and decided to do what you knew you needed to do to get a decent grade, or were there other examples?
No, listen, you know, listen, at sort of Monmouth Comprehensive School, the subjects I excelled in were like English because I like talking.
Right.
Yeah, I used to in English, you know, when it came to asking questions, I was always the one with my hand up in the air to the point where the teacher used to say, you know, when it came to question time, I immediately put my hand up. She said, anyone other than David. I go,
Okay.
you know, and then maths, which was just problem solving, the way my brain works, you know, it came effortlessly to me, really, which is, you know, solving problems, equations, you know, it's just, I didn't even, it's just something that clicked in my brain that I could just do, like instinctively almost. Of course, you know, when it comes to A levels, it's a bit more complicated than that, and doing a curriculum that I didn't even know the basics in, you know, and trying to do it at an advanced level. But you know, what I learned there was about myself. Wasn't academic. I learned about myself, how I cope with stress, for example, you know, and how I cope with the adversity of a bad physics practical exam, you know, stuff like that, you know.
So what was behind your dad? Because I don't know about you, but my dad was my driving kind of mentor in relation to education. It was the era of, not that my mum wasn't enlightened, she was, but it was my dad that would be more concerned about education. And what was it about taking you out of the comprehensive and not allowing you? I'm assuming you could have kept you could have stayed at the comprehensive school and studied those 3 subjects?
No, they clashed at the comprehensive school. So I couldn't do them at the comprehensive school. So my dad paid for me to go to the
I see.
private.
What could you have done if you?
I don't know. I'm
see.
not sure. But I can tell, at that stage, I just wanted to get the hell out of the education system,
I
wanted
see. Okay.
Well, I mean, this, I didn't want to sit in a classroom learning bullshit,
And
Uh,
what was your parents, and if you had any siblings, kind of reaction and or view of how you were doing what you were doing? Were your parents supportive of you in terms of, okay, you
No,
can't
I
do
don't
that?
really recall my parents taking any interest in how I did educationally, even though my father was paying for the private school. Yeah, it was very much a world of my own, just having to think things through on my own.
Okay. What about brothers and sisters? Any of those?
I could sort of tell you something that might sort of go some way to explain it, but I'm just trying to think if I'm being disrespectful to. Two things are going through my mind now. One, whether I'm being disrespectful to any members of my family, even though my mother's the only one left alive. And two, whether by saying it, I'm going to give potential ammunition to, I've got a lot of enemies because of what I do.
Yeah, understood.
I don't like to give them anything that.
No, I got it. So let's move on and talk about siblings. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Just on that point, I've had people visiting my, people who I've exposed.
Yeah, we'll come on to the scary bits.
I had somebody to visit my mother,
Yeah, so we'll come on to those things in a minute. But what about siblings? Any brothers and sisters that went off?
I had a brother. He's dead. I mean, he wasn't like me at all. He was quite quiet, whereas I can't shut the fuck up, to be honest. He was in the army, and then he became a postman, and then he was in private security. He actually died in Iraq.
Wow.
But he actually died of a heart attack. So yeah.
And was that many moons ago or not?
Let's see, it's like 7, 8 years ago, something like that.
Okay.
He died relatively young, like 50.
Sounds like it.
Early 50s.
Sounds like it. Yeah. And what was it, a profound impact that it had on you, or were you not really close to your brother, or how did it impact you?
I hold an annual conference in London, which we may get to, but the reason I mention that is I was at one of our London conferences. It was the first morning. I took a call, and the woman on the line said, "Oh, is that David?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "I've got some bad news. Andrew is dead." Now, for that conference, our closing speaker was a British journalist who was actually now dead, called Andrew Jennings. I thought it was somebody telling me that, your closing speaker, tomorrow, your closing speaker is dead. I'm just giving you the heads up.
Wow.
So it took like a couple of minutes before she realized I didn't know who she was talking about. And she finally said, "Your brother, Andrew," So was, so I remember, man, that was the first morning of my conference. I went outside of the hotel.
Yeah.
Had a short cry. Pulled myself together and sort of got on with the show, And the odd thing is that a few years prior to that, I was at our London conference. It had just ended. And I got news that my father was in hospital. I got in a car, drove from central London to Wales, and just got to see him before he died. Well, I only go to England twice a year, so both my brother and my father have died during or shortly after our conference. And when my brother passed away, it was in Iraq, so it took a couple of weeks before the body was flown back to the UK. There's all sorts of red tape.
Yeah.
And it had been embalmed. And I had to identify the body after he'd been dead for over 2 weeks, and I wasn't sure, what state it would be in. And I didn't want one of his children to identify it, or my mother, you know,
Yeah.
because I wondered what the smell would be, what the visuals would be, and I can always remember going to the funeral home, and the body was in a room, I was in a corridor, and I jammed my right foot again, at the base of this wall. I jammed my left foot at the base of this wall, and they opened the door because I didn't know what I was going to be faced with. It
Yeah.
could have been so shocking that I could have just fainted or something, right? So
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
pissing myself, and but it wasn't as bad as I the worst case scenario I'd built up in my head. It wasn't as bad as that. But yeah, both of those things happened. Yeah,
And your brother has left nephews and nieces of yours, or
three daughters.
wow,
Yeah,
tough,
yeah,
tough. They must have been in their, I don't know, under teens or something at that
yeah,
stage.
yeah. They were relatively young. Yeah, so,
Tough. And does that have an impact on you today? The fact that your brother, does it make you live life even more to the max than you used to, or not really?
listen, I think as you grow older, if you're a healthy person, you evolve, right? Your mindset changes. So yeah, and and so every experience, particularly extreme experiences, shapes your views. And yeah, I'm very conscious of the fact that we're here for a nanosecond. So this is what this goes into my work. If people threaten me, my attitude is, fuck you. So what? Couldn't give a shit. You want to threaten me? Okay, threaten me. you know it doesn't unduly bother me. It used to bother me. It doesn't anymore, because I'm very, very conscious of, we're just here. Yeah, we all build ourselves up, every problem we have, right? And oh, we're all so important, and the world revolves around us. And I learned a long time ago, it's just nonsense. Like, put things into perspective.
Yeah.
It's the road to sanity, right? Keeping sane, putting everything into perspective. So yeah, things like, my brother dying, my father dying, a lot of different experiences. It takes a lot to genuinely shake me. It used to be in my salad days, as Shakespeare would say, if I got sued, I'd get a knot in my stomach. It
Okay.
would just tighten every day, tighten, you know, and it wouldn't go away until the lawsuit went away, getting sued for defamation, which is
Yeah.
just occupational hazard. Now, honestly, somebody who serves me with a defamation action, I'm not kidding you. I toss it to one side and I'll just read it at my leisure. I'm not immediately going through like this, put it to one side, continue what I'm doing. Maybe 2 or 3 days later, I'll think, oh, Christ, I better read this thing.
But don't
Uh,
you, I would imagine, knowing David, and you and I have never sat down for more than 10, 15 minutes, but I thought you were about to say, when someone serves you with a writ for defamation, you were going to say, come on, baby, bring it on. You just do your worst. No, that's not
Well, no,
your.
I don't want to give the process server a hard time because they're just doing their job. I can remember, actually, I got served once on stage at our London conference, and it
Right.
just ended, and there's a very attractive girl started walking towards me, and I can remember thinking, oh, this looks promising. And she said, are you David Marchant? I'm like, you're damn right I'm Marchant. And she said, hey, take this, you've been served. You
That's
know?
creative, which I don't know whether you're allowed, you can. Which law firm made that creative decision to send a bit of a honey trap?
Well, or it could have just been coincidence that the pronus server they used just was hot.
True,
But
true.
that particular case, gosh, it could have been one or two. I've been sued so many times, it all becomes a bit of a blur. It would have been either on behalf of Timothy Schools, or on behalf of privileged wealth. I exposed both of those.
Right.
Timothy Smalls is currently serving a 14-year prison sentence. So,
For
he's
fraud
yeah, for fraud and money laundering. He's
in
sued.
the UK or the
And I
US?
told him what would happen. I told his attorney what would happen to him if he sued me.
Right.
Right, his stupid, dumb attorney,
Attorney.
who used to be the president of the Law Society of England and Wales. His
Oh
attorney,
my God.
and I'm not kidding you. I literally, if you want to go ahead and sue me, okay, all right, see what happens to your client, I was at one of our London conferences. A lot of this is revolving around our London conference. The Serious Fraud Office came to see me during our London conference. Said, "Would you come to our office once the conference is over and just chat to us about the case?" So I ended up chatting to them. I later gave them a formal witness statement, with all my exhibits,
Yeah.
and yada, yada, yada. He got 14 years in prison. We ran
Wow.
ahead that began in true, like, Sun newspaper style. Gotcha. That was, and the reason, gotcha there, how he was sentenced. And the reason I put that headline was to send a message out there to anyone else who wants to sue me.
So, on average, how often are you sued? And has it got less as the years go on?
It's absolutely got less. So the first time I was sued was by a Panama-based American CPA called Mark Harris.
Okay.
So Offshore Alert was launched in 1997. People
Okay.
didn't know what to make of us. Yeah, it came along like a whirlwind. And my mentality was, I'm going to expose anything that moves. I didn't think. I was like an amoeba. I didn't think beyond the now, right? And I didn't think, oh, I might get sued, and how am I going to pay my bills? And can I really afford to have 3 lawsuits on the go, which actually happened at one stage? And I had some years where my own legal fees were greater than the entire revenue of the company. So forget about paying any other bills. I couldn't even afford my legal fees.
Wow.
And but Mark Harris sued me. We had a libel trial at federal court. I was a defendant, and my company was a defendant. And I can always remember on the first morning of the trial, I was being sued for defamation by 3 corporations, like 2 in Nevis and 1 in the British Virgin Islands. And the judge, in the first morning, this lasted 6 days, he turned to their attorney and said, "Oh, does Mr. Harris intend to testify at this trial?" And their attorney said, "Oh, no, Your Honor, this involves sort of offshore matters. You know what he's like. It's like he's concerned about traveling to the United States from Panama." And the judge said, "Well, what are we doing here then? I mean, if he thinks he's going to be arrested, if he sets foot in the United States, what are we doing here?" "Oh, Your Honor, it's a bit more complicated than that." And it's like, Jesus. So we had 6 days of nonsense, and the judge issued a 17-page. It was a bench trial judgment, all in my favor. This was a seal of approval to all the people out there who were not sure what to make.
So, how
of
long after you'd started business did this case occur, David?
So I launched March 1997. The trial was 1998. I can't remember the month.
So,
I think
pretty
it's summer.
early on.
Yeah, it was like 15 months. And that was a seal of approval. His group collapsed. He went on the run, fled to Nicaragua, the US, with whom I cooperated in the investigation. For anyone out there who's thinking about suing me, you bring it on, baby. See what happens. I cooperated with the IRS criminal division. Anyway,
Right.
lovely United States, certainly at that time. They arranged for Mark Harris to be arrested by local police at traffic lights. His car was trundling along, came to a red light. They just blocked the car, put him on a plane, no extradition, just deported, put him on a plane. The U.S. Marshals went on the plane, and it would just happen to be going to the United States, and he was arrested. I don't know technically whether they had to wait for US airspace to arrest
Right.
him, however it works. And they offered him a deal of 5 years. He wouldn't take it because he's an idiot, and he pleaded not guilty. There was a trial which I covered, and I had I was going to say the pleasure. It really didn't give me any pleasure, but I saw him shuffling into court in manacles and shackles. Because in the earlier proceedings, they're dealing with preliminary matters with all sorts of crooks, murderers, rapists,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And he's shuffling into court in his orange jumpsuit. I covered the trial. He got convicted, fraud, money laundering, sentenced to 17 years. And he was virtually exactly the same age as me. Our birthdays were about 6 days apart or something.
Wow. So he's done his time now?
Yeah, he got out some time ago. Yeah.
Any attempt by him to wreak vengeance on you, or not at all?
Nobody has wreaked vengeance. This guy had a T-shirt made that said in Spanish, "David Marchant is only alive because killing him would be a crime." And I know this because a journalist in Panama went to interview him at his office.
Okay.
While I was exposing him, and saw it hanging up in his office. And she said, "Well, what's this?" And he said, "Oh, it's just a joke." Yeah. But
so this also begs so many questions. But the first one is, when all of your initial upbringing is in the west of England, in Wales, in Monmouth.
Well, it's another country. It's not the west of England. It's its own country, Gary.
That's true. My wife would certainly give me a hard time if I said that England was part of Wales and vice versa. But anyway, putting that geographical slip apart, you were living in Wales. What on earth takes you to the US?
So I wanted to get the hell out of Britain at some stage, because it's a pretty depressing country. The weather's depressing. Other people are depressing. I mean, listen, I'm just giving you, I don't want to lose any subscribers over this or any attending or big sponsors. I'm just trying to be honest here, because what's the point? I'm not going to sit here like someone stiff, just giving you stock answers.
Yeah.
I just, listen, I'm being perfectly honest. It was just too miserable for me.
When did you leave? Which year? Because maybe I can relate.
I had a ton of money. You got to put this in a prism. It's not like I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, right?
No, I get
it's not
it.
like I had a ton of money to go to Glastonbury and eat at a Michelin-starred restaurant or anything, right? My first job was in Ebbw Vale, where the unemployment rate was about 25%.
Wow.
Think about that. One in every, 4 people. Told you I was good at math, right?
Yeah, very good. Very quick. Very quick. So tell me this. What year was it? Hold on. What year was it that you left the UK?
1984.
84.
2.5 years, and one of those years was during the miners' strike, when there was a battle of will between Arthur Scargill of the National Union of Mine Workers and Margaret Thatcher.
Yes.
I mean, every other time there had been a dispute between the British government and the NUM, the National Union of Mine Workers, the union had won, and it had basically brought down the government.
Correct.
Thatcher, the first one, the Iron Lady, the first one to prevail. And Ebbw Vale, which is where I lived, was a coal mining and steelworking town,
Right.
And my training, I used to, I did a 9-month journalism course at Cardiff that preceded me working for the Gwent Gazette in Ebbw Vale, which was part of Celtic Press, that was based in Merthyr Tydfil, where I used to go for a night out on weekends, because Ebbw Vale was so rough that even Merthyr Tydfil was like paradise, by comparison. And I used to cover Tredegar Magistrates Court on a Tuesday, Ebbw Vale Magistrates Court on a Wednesday, and Abertillery Magistrates Court on a Thursday. And these cases were grim. I would say, we're talking about, some of them were bestiality, because there's a lot of lot of sheep in Wales, as everyone knows, and a
Dear
lot of
me.
miscreants, and a lot of the cases were fights. And I mean, I'm not kidding you. Every story that I wrote was pretty much the same when it came to fighting. Every fight happened in the queue for the Chinese takeaway from like 11 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. because you were kicked out of the pubs. I think it was at 11 p.m.
Right.
I got my times wrong. It's been a while, and so you could either go and wait, stand in line at the Chinese restaurant or the free Indian restaurant. And of course, you got a long line and somebody sees their ex-girlfriend with her new
Yeah.
boyfriend or something, and there's a bit of fisticuffs. Um, and so I used to cover a lot of court cases. And uh, the other two types of things that I used to report on, one were golden wedding anniversaries. And for those out there who don't know, a golden wedding anniversary is not when you're married for 50 minutes or 50 days, which seems to be the sort of norm. It's 50 frigging years, And we used to do them all the time. Think about this, all the time. Golden wedding anniversaries.
Yeah.
So I would do the puff piece, and a photographer would take the photograph. And the other types of cases were Abervale's one big council estate. If you're watching this from the States, the projects.
Right.
And things would go wrong in people's homes. They would call the local council, Blaenau Gwent, whatever it was called, local council, whatever. And or Abervale, this, whatever.
Yeah.
And they would say, "Oh, look, the toilet's not working, or there's a leak here, or something else isn't working." And the council would say, "Oh, whatever, we'll get around to it at some stage." And they'd get tired of waiting, so they'd call the press. This is the big David Marchant
Okay.
song. Go out to the council estate, interview the old lady, who had the complaint, and we'd write the story, big exclusive, and then the council would get embarrassed, and it would expedite the repair process. I can always remember this one house on the Tredegar, no, the Rasa industrial estate. This woman lived in his house with her kids and dogs and whatever, and her problem was the upstairs toilet was leaking, so urine was leaking
Oh,
ceiling,
no.
and it was collecting in the kitchen in a bucket.
Oh,
And I can also remember this. So I went there to interview her. As I'm walking, before I even got outside the house, like the smell, no, it was just over the general smell of whatever the hell
yeah.
it was overpowering to the point where I thought I was going to vomit. And because I'm British, I remember thinking, well, this would be embarrassing if I spontaneously vomit. Like, this is really embarrassing. So I managed to keep it together, and I walked inside the house. Honestly, it was overpowering. And then within 6 years, I was working in Bermuda, where there's no unemployment. It was no unemployment, and I worked there for 6 years. I interviewed 3 billionaires. Like I went from interviewing a woman who's, urine's leaking, into a kitchen where she
Right.
cooks food, to interviewing billionaires.
So how does that happen?
How many of those billionaires do you think later went to prison?
Go on. I'm going to take a guess. All of them.
Well, let's see how good your math is. 67%.
Okay. So
Two of them.
2 out of 3. Not bad for an enumerate lawyer. So, but tell us briefly, how do you get from toilets with urine leaking down to the kitchen to Bermuda? What's the...
So I wanted to leave the UK. I had enough, and I saw a job advertised in the UK Press Gazette
Right.
for a job in Bermuda. I went for an interview. They were interviewing in London. I went for an interview in London. They told me I didn't get the job. They had a lot of people going for the one job, as you'd imagine, come to Bermuda. But they said, the next one will be yours. And we have, a regular turnover of people.
Okay.
So once I qualified as a journalist, I left the job in Aberfale, went to Bournemouth. That's right. Went to Bournemouth to work for Bournemouth Evening Echo. It was while I was in Bournemouth that I applied for this job in Bermuda. They said you wouldn't get it. So I then went to work for the Western Daily Press, which is based in Bristol. And I had an area to cover called the Forest of Dean, where, it's all right, old Bert, how are you, old Bert? Oh, well done, old Bert, right there, It was a bit like Aberfale, just different accent.
I
So
love it.
I worked for, I didn't want to live in the Forest of Dean, so I lived in Chepstow. I found a beautiful Mews cottage to live in.
Right.
And just to get, I get each day, yeah. Oh, by the way, when I first started off as a journalist, I used to do stories on a typewriter. There was no internet, no
No, of course.
I used to have a typewriter. I used to put a piece of paper, carbon paper, and another piece of paper.
Yeah.
I'd do my old tricky dicky finger routine.
Yeah.
And do the first the intro on one piece of paper. I'd put one, take it out of the typewriter, put one on a spike. That was my copy and one for the editor. And then put another two pieces of paper sandwiched by carbon and just write the story that way. If you made a mistake, you'd have to get I think it was called Tipex or Whiteout.
Yeah.
It's like this liquid, And
right. Come on. You've distracted me now. How do you get to you? So you eventually got the job in Bermuda.
So I got a job in Bermuda, yeah. And my first, I was working for the Western Daily Press. I got the call. I'd been there a year. I got the call saying 1 year after the job interview, okay, come to Bermuda. So on pretty much my last day at work at the Western Daily Press,
yes,
I'd written about called Norton's Coin it was a point-to-point horse. Point-to-point is when you jump over hedges.
Right.
He was running in the Cheltenham Gold Cup against the housewife's favorite Desert Orchid, right? 100-1 Norton's Coin was. I'd done a story on him. My landlord said, "Oh, you need to put a bet." I put a £5 each way bet on Norton's Coin to win.
Desert Orchid.
In 100-1, and the red hot favorite was Desert Orchid, a white horse.
Right.
Norton's Coin bloody won.
So that's
£635 back. It was like a
windfall.
I bought some jewelry from Ratner's to give to a girl.
Oh.
Listen to this. Went to Bermuda. Now, I don't know if you can remember, Ratner's was run by Gerald.
Yeah, Gerald Ratner.
Do you know what he was known for? He gave a speech.
Yeah.
And somebody asked him during the speech, "Why is your jewelry so inexpensive?" And he said, "Because it's crap."
Crap, yeah.
And he had to leave.
Yeah.
He got kicked out,
No, I knew his or one of his children. So that was my era as well. So so hold on, this is quite romantic. The first time
we'll leave it at that. Anyway,
I see.
But is that was just as I was, just before I was going on a plane to go to Bermuda. I went to Bermuda as a general news reporter. And this is core, right, to the Offshore Alert could not have existed if this one thing did not happen.
Okay.
My day at work, they said, "Oh, you'll be covering business." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know anything about business. I don't even know about like corner shop business. I know nothing, much less highly sophisticated, international insurance, reinsurance, hedge fund business that goes on in Bermuda." Well, tough. You're covering business.
Well, what did you think you went there to cover?
General news. I went there as a general news. I went to cover golden wedding anniversaries, but just in a sunnier climate, basically,
But so at that stage, you wouldn't have known that Bermuda was full of all these either already well off or wanting to be well off,
I
lawyers, accountants,
didn't know much
insurers?
about it at all. Didn't
No.
know much about it at all. So anyway, I went there, and for the first couple of years in Bermuda, I was just looking for a good time.
Yeah.
And but that's difficult to find in Bermuda because it's a very the best description of Bermuda I ever heard was it's a well-kept graveyard.
Ah, okay.
It's
That's
speed
cool.
limit's 20 miles an hour, right? 20 miles an hour speed limit. I got caught once speeding twice in like one of my. I'd been there only a couple of weeks, and within 1 week, I got caught speeding twice. Normally, that's a ban, but because mine had happened back to back, I didn't have any like prior convictions. They dealt with it all at the same time, so I didn't get banned. But when I say speeding, I was going 30 miles an hour on my scooter on one occasion, and 35 miles an hour on the other. Yeah, I mean
You're a bit of a hell's angel. Now listen,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
you may just shout me down because you clearly didn't want to go into the romance thing. So you're quite a solitary guy. You don't actually.
I'm like a leopard. Listen, to be honest, listen. To be honest, to be an investigative journalist, you've got to be. I'm just trying to like choose my words correctly because I don't want to give like a false impression. You've got to be wired differently.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't say you've got to be wired better or worse, but you definitely differently. And I like I said, I had some years where my own legal fees
exceeded your revenue. Yeah.
So that makes no sense, right? What sort of person just continues like this? You got to be, if you wrote it down on a piece of paper, risk or reward, it doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's quite difficult for anyone to live with me, to be honest, because I'm very sort of determined, very bloody minded.
Yeah.
So you have like tunnel vision. So honestly, like for me, the worst thing to happen was if my company went bust. It would have destroyed me personally.
I see.
The worst thing for me wasn't, oh, do I have a good social life? Or if I met the woman of my dreams. It was just, I cannot fail at this.
Right.
So I work like whatever it took, 7 days a week, get up at, 5 in the morning, work till, 9 at night. I was just obsessed.
Right.
And so you got to be wired differently. You've got to be, like I said, a chip on each shoulder. You got to be a bit pissed off, to be honest. And
you've got to be comfortable in your own skin and in your own company. You've got to not mind being solitary.
Robin Williams, the comedian, who's no longer with. I read about like his childhood, and it was sort of similar to mine. He used to like spend a lot of time on his own, and he used to invent these characters in his head.
Right.
Yada yada yada. That was the groundwork for comic genius. So with me, I used to spend a lot of time on my own trying to process what the hell was going on. And I don't know if that's certainly a significant reason, but I'm very where I live, I've got my own well system. I've got my own solar system. I've got my own septic system. The last 2 miles to my house is a dirt road, right? Well, why is that? I left Miami, which is party central. And I'm very happy, very comfortable in my own skin. I'd rather spend time on my own being productive than out at dinner parties just gossiping, talking about things that aren't particularly important, or don't interest me. So who the hell knows? It's such a variety.
Yeah. So how do you select? We're getting towards the end, but I've still got so much more to cover. But how do you select the people you investigate? Do you go through the tabloids or whatever and say, I'm going to go and have a look at this geezer?
Listen, I've been doing this for so long that I'm a lightning rod. Offshore Alert is a lightning rod for victims. Victims who are frustrated that the police won't help them, regulators won't help them, so they come to me. That's one way. I'm constantly doing research, so I can spot a fraud. Frauds aren't complicated. I can spot a fraud in seconds,
Right.
And for example, if you see a purported performance chart and it's like a Nazi salute, in the sense that it's a diagonal line with little or no variation trending upwards over, a long period of time. Well, it's a Ponzi scheme. You need to know nothing else about it, right? You
Yeah.
don't need to know who's behind it. You don't need to know what they're investing in. It's literally a Ponzi scheme. It's like if you walk down the street, how do you know a car is a car? You don't need a certificate saying, "Oh, this is a car." Well, it's got a chassis, it's got four tires, it's got a steering wheel. That's a car. Well, that's how easy it is to detect fraud for me because I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. And so you get this incoming, as they say, of how many cases a week or whatever would you get, or do you get from people saying, "I need help"?
Listen, sometimes
Hundreds?
it's like a London bus, they come in a
I
flow.
see. Okay.
Sometimes there's a lull. But I've got a sophisticated monitoring system in place where information comes to me, you know. But one thing I'd like to say before we wrap it up is, I don't have we don't have libel insurance, because
Right.
the best libel insurance of all. That's putting people in prison. People who sue you, put them in prison.
Right.
And who's next? Who wants a piece of this action? Journalists normally live in fear. Honestly, you're a lawyer, Gary, and when a lawyer sends a threatening letter to a journalist, it has a chilling effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm fortunate enough to live in the United States where the libel laws are kinder to journalists than they are in the UK. But one thing I had to figure this out on my own. These lawsuits have to go away. I can't continue like
Right.
this. It's financially unsustainable. Okay, Mark Harris sued me, got sentenced to 17 years. The First International Bank of Grenada Group sued me. One of the five of them got criminally charged. One died pending trial. The other four got varying prison sentences. More recently, Timothy Schools got 14 years in England. So when people sue me, I'll say, okay, listen, I'm a professional journalist. I'm just going to do my job, right? If I approach your client before I publish, he or she declined to comment. There's an open offer. He or she wants to put their side of things. After the fact, I'll publish it. This is the way I operate. But let's get one thing straight. Your fucking client sues me. This is what the fuck is going to happen. I can't guarantee I'm going to put him in prison or her. I can guarantee I will do everything I can to put him or her in prison. And this is no idle threat. Here
Yeah.
are some case numbers for you to research, which gives you an insight into who I am and what I'm capable of, right? Here's a defamation case number. Here's a corresponding criminal case number a few years later, over and over and over again. So sue me, see what happens to your client. Timothy Schools didn't believe me. He got sentenced to 14 years in prison. Now, not just because of me, right?
No, I get it.
But
So
that investigation was triggered as a result of us.
So
and
no one yet, thankfully, no one yet has succeeded in a defamation suit against you.
Well, it depends what your definition of success is. So
I see.
prior to 2010, wherever I was sued, I would defend it. In 2010, the Speech Act was passed. This means that essentially foreign defamation actions are unenforceable in the United States as a matter of federal law.
Right.
So they're literally unenforceable. So since 2010, if I'm sued outside the United States, I don't defend them because this is the decision. And I've been sued twice in London. This
Okay.
is the decision. Either I'm putting myself at risk of spending hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not in excess of £1 million per case,
Yeah.
which I don't have,
Yeah.
or I can spend nothing. right? Knowing that it will have hopefully no material impact on me because it's unenforceable in the United States. So any assets I have are in the United States. So, but what that means that so if you are sued outside the United States, you don't defend it. The plaintiff can apply for a judgment in default of appearance, and get a judgment. So this has happened twice in England and once in Canada, where default judgments have been entered. And one of the cases, Privilege Wealth, which was brought by somebody who became a disqualified director in the UK, they got a default judgment against me. And my understanding, which is based on the opposing attorney's boasting of it, is that the biggest award ever obtained by a corporation, the biggest defamation award in favor of a corporation, not an individual, in the history of UK law. But what does that mean? It's unenforceable in the United States.
No.
I hope. And by the way, that judge in that case, even though it was a default judgment, he issued a written judgment as if the been heard on its merits. This idiot judge, he's an idiot, a disgrace to the legal profession, because this was a fraud that preyed on the elderly. He issued it in his judgment, default judgment. I hadn't entered an appearance in. This is so obviously not a fraud. I need to send a message so that Privilege Wealth can take my message to their clients and reassure them. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, man, you've got to be a fucking idiot. It made me angry, right?
I bet it did.
And
what happened? What happened to Privilege?
2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, this idiot's judgment, the fund had been suspended because there had been an internal dispute.
Yeah.
This was based in Panama as well. And one of the insiders got shot by another insider on a motorbike. There had been an assassination attempt. There was like an internal dispute over how to split up the money that they'd ripped off from the elderly. This happened within a couple of weeks. This guy writing, "Oh, this is so obviously not a fraud." And by the way, it was like offering ridiculously high, rates of return. I mean, honestly, I don't know what the judge was thinking. Maybe he wasn't thinking,
No. So what happened? Did the police investigate not just the assassination?
There was, I got a photograph, I think, of the guy maybe in hospital or something. And so the fund was suspended, and then everyone admitted it was a fraud, right? It went into liquidation. Everyone admitted it was a fraud, but they just could not agree on who committed it. Within 2 weeks of this idiot saying it's not a fraud. I mean, Jesus Christ. Okay, I don't enter an appearance, enter a default judgment against me, write something appropriate.
Yes.
Don't, because there are real people with real money.
Yeah.
Whose lives are being ruined by this. Victims of frauds I exposed commit suicide.
Disgraceful.
This isn't a game.
Disgraceful.
People might be watching. I can be animated, Gary. They might be watching this thing. Oh, he comes across like this, like that. I'm not sure if that's particularly appealing, whatever. But listen, I live on planet Earth. I've got my feet on the ground.
Yeah.
Money we're dealing with. This is life savings. This is depression. This is people who could kill themselves, right, because of this activity. So I make no excuses. You are an attorney. I couldn't care if you're a former president of the Law Society of England and Wales. You want to take me on? Frigging do your best, because I'm going to destroy you. By destroying, I'm not talking about being unprofessional. You write me an obnoxious letter, I'm going to publish this, and guess what? Your kids are going to read this. They'll know what you do for a living, and they're not going to look at you the same ever again. And there's nothing you can do about it. You want to be an arsehole? You want to represent crooks? I'm going to hold you accountable.
That's probably a great phrase to end one of the most interesting podcasts so far. David, you're going to be an a-hole. I'm going to hold you accountable. There's so much more for us to talk about. We haven't even touched most of the cases that you've done, but I think we've gone into what makes a little bit of what makes David Marchant and drives you the way it does. So I got to say, I enjoyed every single minute of it, David. Thank you very much. I'm definitely going to come knocking again on your door for stage 2 and stage 3.
Oh, I appreciate it, Gary. I'm going to have a lie down now.
Take care, buddy.
All right, Gary. All the best then.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please click and subscribe to the Intelligence Advantage podcast on Spotify and other platforms.